just gotta listen.
Hey everybody, it's your friendly neighbourhood podcast, Strangest Things here. So this sesh, we are talking to Robert Earl White from the Order of Light. Robert has an amazing story to tell. From tragedy, he has created something great that helps people who might otherwise feel alone in their experience. And hey Robert, thanks for taking the time to sit down and talk with me.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. So back when I was 4 years old, something truly unimaginable happened to my family that it really left an impact on myself. I was about 4 years old. My mother at the time was 22 years old, and my aunt, that was also a part of this, was 38 years old. Single mom. We lived out in the country here in New Jersey in the United States. We lived not far from a nuclear plant, and out of the nuclear plant, there was a stream that was called Lower Aloes Creek. And the Lower Aloes Creek came right up behind our house where there was a small road, a lot of foxtails and marshland, and there was a small bridge where one car at a time could go across. Directly behind that, there was a small line of trees, and my mother's house, my house, was right there. And next door was my aunt's house. And in the back of both of our houses, there was a small tree line, and then directly over that was the creek, the waterway, and the marsh, and the small road, and the little bridge. So this took place April 21st, 1991, around 10:18 p.m. My aunt next door woke up to use the bathroom, which was in her second story in her house. As she was using the bathroom, she looked out her window, which was facing the back towards the creek, as she witnessed a low object with three blue lights, with a white bright light coming from the middle of it, completely silent, just hovering there, maybe a telephone pole above the tree line. Also, keep in mind, it was raining that night, and the cloud coverage was 1,100 feet, which I know you use the metric system, but
Yeah.
they were low. It was raining. So
Yeah.
this was nothing that was above the clouds. This thing was low. And to be able to
Huh.
see it when it was lightly raining and late at night, it was bright. So my aunt said, I have to call, my mother next door. So
Hmm.
my aunt goes into her bedroom, picks up her phone, dials it, calls my mom next door. At the time, my mother was watching a baseball game with two of her girlfriends. I was upstairs at the time, only 4 years old, 10 o'clock at night. The phone rings. My mother goes to the back of the house, in our kitchen where our phone was, and the window right there was facing the same direction. She picks up the phone, and my aunt says, Beth Ann, there's something behind her house. There's something in the backyard. Look, look, look. So
Hmm.
my mom, she starts looking. She witnesses the same thing. My mother described it as elongated triangle. If you have a triangle on the right angle, it
Yeah.
actually looks longer. And with the lighting of it, and when you have a triangular, the three lights that they were seeing, they're kind of staggered because it was the 3 points on an elongated part. And this thing was completely silent. So as my mother's watching this, her two friends that were on the couch also come running over once they hear the commotion. So we
Oh.
have all these people, and I'll leave myself out of it. I saw it too, but a lot of people say, yeah, you were only 4 years old. But we had four adults that were witnessing this thing all at the same time on the phone with each other, all family and friends. And
Hmm.
as they are watching this, all of a sudden, red and orange sparks start shooting out of this thing, right? Then, like this white flash of light that, like, kind of came down, like within it, on it, not sure, just a very peculiar, like, very strange white, bright white light
Yeah.
flash. And then a kind of an explosion, and this thing just shot to the ground. Instantly, my mother panicked. Everyone just
Yeah.
saw something crash, whether it was extraterrestrial or man made. That was besides the point. If normally, when people witness something that big explode or crash, it's a traumatizing event, no matter what it is, you know.
Mm.
But after they witnessed this, my mother hung up the phone and she called 911. My mother knew better to say that it was a UFO, and at that time, that was not their worry. They
Mm.
seriously thought, well, someone must have been in whatever that was, and someone is definitely dead. That was
Oh.
their only concern. About 10 minutes later, the police came to our house, took my mother's statements, and took my aunt's statements. And shortly after, about 25 minutes later, we had an encounter with the men in black, and a
Mm.
gentleman from the Air Force arrived, and they debriefed my family, and we can get more into that later. Meanwhile, while all of this was going on, it was late. By this time, it was almost 11 o'clock at night. They were tired. My family did not leave the house during this situation. We stayed put. My mother, throughout the rest of the night, around probably 1:30 in the morning through about 6 o'clock in the morning, my mother was on the phone with search and rescue helicopters. That
Mm.
they have four different search and rescue helicopters looking for this mysterious object. So
Wow.
while all that was happening, keep in mind these search helicopters came to the scene a little too late. It was already scrubbed. So
Yeah.
it just turns out that the fire chief of the town is a cousin of mine,
Huh.
and the local firehouse back then in 1991, it was the local hangout. It was the cool place where all the kids would go, all the teenagers,
Yeah.
would hang out. We lived in the country. There was nothing else. That's the
Yeah.
only thing we had. So basically, witnesses and other people heard this side of the story after the fire, guys got back to the firehouse. And this is
Mm.
what the fire chief and the other three guys that were with him. And when they got back, there was two ladies that were there that also, after hearing what the firefighters were saying, they got in their cars to look at shortly after, and they also saw additional evidence. And there were multiple people that saw this. There were at least two other calls that were made to the police reporting the same object from people actually much farther away. There was one gentleman that thought he heard something, but he thought it was a gust of wind because it was raining, and his house was surrounded by trees. He was really close to where it crashed,
Yeah.
but
Right.
his house was surrounded by trees, so he wouldn't have been able to see it. The trees were
Yeah.
right on his house, but he reported this to the police, and this was all, taken and marked down. But the fire trucks, as they were approaching the scene, heading towards this little bridge, they saw a bunch of gouges, like huge, rip marks going through the mud and the
Oh.
foxtails. And as they approached the bridge, there was a Coast Guard boat sitting in the creek, and there was black tarps on the ground, and there was a Coast Guard military guy
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
actually on the ground, and the military Coast Guard guy flagged him down, and they stopped, and he said the situation is under control, and he ordered
Mm.
them to go turn back around. And
Wow.
that's what they did. They got back. They said they thought it was strange, and very weird.
Oh.
The two girls that were there actually went back, which would have been like probably 30, 40 minutes after the fire guys got back. And then when they went there, they saw there was a tree serving service company for cutting down trees back there. They had to remove a couple trees. Also, they
Yeah.
saw a flatbed with black tarps on the back of it. So some sort of cleanup
Hmm.
crew.
Yeah.
And the Coast Guard was involved with this because the Coast Guard nuclear plants are on water.
Hmm.
They put nuclear plants on water. So the Coast Guard is actually in control of patrolling that area. Because this UFO crashed in the vicinity of a nuclear plant, which is a no fly zone, nothing
Yeah.
should be flying over a nuclear
Yeah.
plant.
Totally.
So The Air Force base that was involved was actually a different state, Delaware, Dover Air Force Base, because it's that same waterway, and they were actually closer than the Air Force Base actually here in New Jersey. So they got involved, but all we saw of them was the one gentleman from the Air Force. He was with the two men in black, and that's a whole nother story there. But
Right.
my mother was told by the men in black to report this as a helicopter crash. If you don't, we
Ah.
will take your child away. Um, my mother said, "Yeah, I understand," and that's exactly what happened. My family remained anonymous the following day. MUFON came out. We did not contact them at all. The Mutual UFO Network, the guys with TV shows and all that.
Yeah.
They came out. Newspapers, the local news came out. A lot of different people, and my family wanted to remain anonymous. And my mother on the news, she said, "I'm willing to put my life on it that it was a helicopter trying to protect me." The men in
Yeah,
black did
definitely.
a lot to my mom. That's a whole nother thing, and they filled us in on a lot. And
Mm.
MUFON came. They actually ended up hypnotizing. And why I came forward with my story, a little preface here, is 30 years my family lost all the proof, any sort of proof that anything crashed there.
Mm.
Officially, nothing was ever found, although everyone was saying possible helicopter, because the
Yeah.
men in black went around saying that no helicopter was ever missing. Every military base was called. This is documented. Every
Yeah.
airport was called. Local air agencies. Everyone was connected. Every military base. No
Yeah.
one anything flying that way, nor should anything be flying out that way. And there was nothing missing, but something
Yeah.
crashed, and they cleaned it up. And it turned out the following day, and especially after the men in black, what they did with my mother, it turned out that my mother is actually an abductee. That my mother has had contact with these extraterrestrials, and they've been taking her, and that was a part of the reason why this craft was there. And unfortunately, we lost all the proof of this. For a long time on VHS, we had the video of her on the news talking about it,
Mm.
but we lost it from moving all the time. And it was a lot for my mom to bear with, and the internet wasn't around, so she couldn't find others that went through this experience. We lived in a very religious small town, and reputation was very important, and people were afraid to talk about this. Everyone just thought it was something strange, or they
Yeah.
thought it was a helicopter, but nothing. People just passed it off. They just made everyone forget about it. And then back
Yeah.
in this June, I actually found the articles. I actually found the articles, MUFON articles. I found 6 pages going over every word, every detail, new clues, additional information. And that's when the Lower Alloways Creek started. I put together a documentary because, unfortunately, 2 months before, finding the proof that my family always needed to finally share our story so people would believe us and not think we were crazy. 2 months before, my mother died and passed away at 51 years old. So once I found these articles, I had to make it my mission to make sure no one ever has to go through what my mother or what I've went through. And if someone has an experience and they don't understand it, they shouldn't be shamed for it. They should be educated about it, and they should have people that are willing to listen to them and not deem them as crazy. And when you really start to connect and talk to people, which I have after releasing this, I released 3 different parts of the Lower Alloways Creek incident.
Yeah.
And after all these parts, I had an outpouring of people reaching out and sharing their stories. And I started to make larger connections. I started to see trends. And I started to put people in contact that had the same experience as them, so they could have like someone to confide in. And sometimes all it takes is just one person to say, I believe in you.
Yeah.
It's enough to rock your reality. I was 4 years old, right around 3 or 4 years old. That's right around the age when you start to understand things. You
Yeah.
start to have memories. It's your earliest memories. You're just starting to say, okay, this is the world. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that. This is that. It was it was a reality changer for me and
Yeah.
my family, and it terrified me. I had really, really bad nightmares. My grandfather
Huh.
used to yell at my mom and my
Yeah.
grandmother when they were talking about, stop, you're scaring the youngin, you're scaring the young one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was crazy. But yeah, so do you have any questions?
I do. I have so many questions. Yeah, from the first moment I sort of watched your first documentary, I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And you're a very good storyteller, which makes it easy to listen to. And you just get drawn in. And I just wanted to know more. So for the viewers, I actually got in contact with Robert about writing an article. The article never turned out. But that's why
It
we've
was
got him.
good.
Ah, well, this is why we've got him here today because I just can't let this story just slip
I know you
away.
mentioned you're
It's just got
four,
too many
but
parts and
obviously
elements
you were four at the time, but
about it
obviously
that make it so
a lot of
interesting. What happened carried throughout your life. So it wasn't that you were just four then. Your experience continued because I wasn't aware that your mum had had encounters before the spaceships. I thought they were a thing that happened after. So,
Yes, that's a great. I could go off of that. So yeah,
yeah.
a little preface. I'll go back to the moment where my mother, for the first time in her life, actually
Mm.
realized she was being abducted. When the men in black came to our house with the gentleman from the Air Force, for all the listeners, the men in black, they were wearing black suits and hats, no glasses. They had minor facial hair. They looked human. I'm being
Yeah,
honest, but they did not really act human. They
yeah,
were they were weird, psychologically weird, just
yeah.
strange things. They came inside. My mother and her three friends thought they were there to ask them about the aircraft. They thought it was probably
Mm.
military or something like that. Why would these people be here if it wasn't, right? So they came inside. We had a coffee table and a little sofa. They sat my mother and her two friends down, and the men in black proceeded to pull out a notepad and a pencil. And when they were looking at this pencil, they were looking at it like they've never seen one before and they don't even know how it works. And that's what I mean
Oh
by acting
gosh.
weird, just weird
Mm.
stuff. And they look at my mom and her two friends and say, we want you to draw three different kinds of extraterrestrials. And my mother's two
What?
friends started laughing, just started cracking up like, you gotta be kidding me. And
Yeah,
my
yeah.
mom my mom was kind of silent. And at this
Mm.
point it was almost 11 o'clock at night. It was getting later. So they they asked the other two women to go ahead and leave. But during that time, my mother actually drew three different kinds of aliens,
Yeah.
and that's what put up the red flag. And she drew one she called the blues. They're like a bluish reptilian kind of gray. They're really cool and awesome. She drew your typical gray, your Zeta, your little gray guys,
Yeah.
and then your Nordic being those. But obviously, we'll find out she was in contact with a lot more. But this was just on a spot.
Yeah.
So the other two women left, and after my mom drew those, the gentleman that was in the Air Force was trained in hypnotism. They use hypnosis in the military for soldiers that go through a very traumatic situation, post
Mm.
traumatic stress, in order
Yeah.
to get intel. They can hypnotize them to debrief them in situations where the trauma has blocked out their mind. They've been doing this since the 60s.
Yeah.
This is well known fact, and they are trained in this, although most people don't know. And they did a brief hypno session on my mother. This one gentleman did. And during that time, it all came back to my mom.
Yeah.
Going
Wow.
back prior, this was not a one-time thing. My mother was abducted since she was literally a baby up until the
Oh,
day she
wow.
died. It was a
Mm.
lifetime event. But up till that moment, my mom only thought it was strange dreams, didn't
Yeah,
think nothing
totally.
about it. She thought the markings, even my grandmother used to find her waking up with her having scars on her and,
Wow.
them just passing it off. Well, her fingernail, even though it's a scar, they just passed
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
off as quick as they could. Very strange things. Our house, during the time before and after this crash, but mostly before, my
Mm.
baby monitors would go crazy. I also had a teddy
Wow.
bear that when I would sleep at night had batteries in it, and the teddy bear would actually go off when I would roll on it. So my mom took the batteries out of the teddy bear, and this teddy bear would still go off constantly afterwards.
Wow.
And there was a lot of electrical weird interference. When MUFON came out another time to hypnotize my mother again, which
Oh
I'm
my
looking for
gosh.
the actual tape recording because MUFON has this. I'm working with them trying to find it. But
Mm.
when they were recording it, they had their own tape recorder. My family had their own tape recorder, and our tape recorder has some sort of interference. So my
Oh,
family
wow.
wasn't able to record it. They
Yeah.
tried. Now, MUFON, I think they did get it, but I'm having a hard time. Out of the three guys that were working on the case, two of them are
Yeah.
dead, and the one no one can get a hold of. And I'm working with like the director of MUFON. I'm working with like the top of the top, and we
Yeah,
still
yeah.
can't find anything on this, and it's driving me crazy. But my mother had a lot of encounters with these things, and at that
Yeah,
moment when that
totally.
gentleman with the Air Force hypnotized her, it all came back to her. And
Mm.
then later on, when MUFON came back out and hypnotized my mother, then it really started coming out. And in the articles, my mom was describing her dreams she had the night before the crash. Like they're in the articles and they're wild. She had a
Yeah.
dream she was going out to a half wooded area where she saw 3 to 4 large hamster cages with red and orange twist ties going up the bars, and there was mongooses walking upright and towards her, and she saw
Yeah.
2 large snakes, and she felt like she was protecting the snakes from the mongooses. And after MUFON came out and they did a deeper hypno session, then things got like really, really deep. Where the gentleman
Yeah.
from the Air Force, it was a rush job. They were trying to clean this up as quick as possible before the search and rescue came out, before everyone else got there. So they were in a hurry. They did everything brief. They answered my mother's questions. But what came out to be was after these things, every time it would happen again, there was no
Mm.
more screen memory. My mom would actually recall them, unlike before. Something about this hypnosis therapy they did, this regression, it
Yeah.
like unblocked something in there. And my mom had a lot of encounters with different beings. Most were positive, and there were some nasty ones, unfortunately. It's just the
Yeah.
way of the universe.
Yeah. What I find is really interesting is once they did the hypnotherapy and obviously got whatever answers they were searching for, did they just up and leave her with those newfound recalled memories, or did they offer her any therapy, or did anyone monitor her after that?
Perfect. Thank you. I was saving this, so thank you
Oh,
so much. So
nice segue.
after the Men in Black, after they hypnotized her, and the Men in Black obviously knew that my mom knew. There was
Mm,
no hiding it anymore. She spilled the beans. She said too much, if anything. So
mm,
afterwards, the Men in Black said, "Do you have any questions?" Which, if you hear a lot of Men in Black stories, they
yeah,
don't they don't they don't give you answers. And
yeah,
even in my story, their answers are very blunt, but they were kind enough, if you want to call it that. I think they're awful people, because they
Yeah.
threatened my mother, 22-year-old single mom with a 4-year, like, who does that? Like,
Yeah.
for national security. Ugh. But so basically my mom asked them three simple questions, and they answered them. And I believe their answers are true, personally.
Mm.
The first question my mother asked, after realizing that this phenomenon was happening to her and being kind of, a little afraid and shocked and, whoa, these things are real. The first
Yeah.
question she asked, are these things dangerous? Oh, good question, right? The men in black replied, if they were dangerous, do you think we would still be here? It was blunt, short as
Yeah.
that. And it answered her question. The
Mm.
second question my mother had, why don't people know about these things? Which the men in black replied, we're doing everything we can by preconditioning. Within the next 10 years, this was 1991,
Mm.
so next 10 years, 2001, you will see signs of extraterrestrials, aliens in movies, books, all kinds of media, everything.
Mm.
And that was that. So they're preconditioning. That was a word I learned at a very young age, and
Ah, yeah.
I grew up really paying attention to any movie talking about aliens or UFOs. No matter
Yeah.
how crazy or wonky it is, I really kept an eye on it, and I understood that in movies there's about 90% truth mixed with 10% lies to keep you guessing.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to use balance. But I grew up knowing this because of this. They actually gave us kind of heads up information,
Yeah.
and so the third question,
Mhm.
that's last one was very, once again straight and blunt. Third question, after my mom realized that she was being abducted, taken physically out of the house and going somewhere else, as a good mother, her concern was, what would happen if something happened to my child, me, or at the time, my elderly grandfather who also lived there that my mother took
Mm.
care of? What would happen if I'm gone and something happens to him? And the men in black replied, they use small grays that stay behind. And they kind of explain them as they're the workers. They stay
Huh.
behind. And if anything was to happen to you, your grandfather, or your child, they would have you back, and then the men in black snap their fingers. Like, and meaning instantly. They would have you back in a snap. My mom said, okay, thank you. She didn't have any more questions. I know you and I have so many
Mm.
questions, and the listeners will, also have a lot of questions. But we were small
Yeah.
country folk, and there was a lot going on. It was a traumatic event, and
Yeah.
I think they were pretty good, simple questions. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of weight in there. And then
Mm.
before they left, they told my mother, hey, tomorrow the news is going to come out, newspapers, UFO researchers, they're all going to be here. You're going to say it was a helicopter, or we will take your child away. And
Yeah.
after hearing how worried she was and concerned about me, what do
Mm.
they threaten her with? You know,
Obviously. Yeah. Yep.
no
Really
brainer.
weird.
It's military,
Yep.
warfare of the
See
mind.
weakness,
It's
expose
awful.
weakness.
That's exactly what they
Yeah.
did. At the same time, from other stories I've heard, I think we're lucky that we got any answers at all. I've heard a lot of
Mm.
stories where they don't give anything, nothing.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I guess we were
question.
lucky.
Yeah, totally. But that second question, I find that really interesting, the preconditioning thing, because I think even recently, a was it a fighter pilot of some sort came forth, or some documents were shared about a fighter pilot who'd witnessed extraterrestrial crafts, and he was suddenly allowed to come public with it, or the documents were made public. I'm not sure which it was, but I sort of just recalled it when you were talking about preconditioning. And I think with the internet, they can't stop preconditioning from happening anyway. So they haven't planned it, it's just happening whether they want it or not. And I guess they just have to
That's
deal with
such
an
Yeah,
interesting thing.
and that's a great point too. You've been seeing it, and it's been building up. And because of the internet, it's only a snowball effect. Now, this
Yeah.
happened in 1991, and it seems like every time this closure is about to happen, there is a great distraction. It's done on purpose. I want to make this clear. And
Mm.
this was 1991. They told us in 10 years, basically, this closure would be here. That's
Mm.
2001 when 9/11 happened. Whoa, the biggest distraction of that time period.
Yeah.
Then, you come to the new age of disclosure. The same time frame of the Pentagon releasing UFOs they've caught
Mm.
is during a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
see every time it's about to come, there are new distractions because if the truth got out about these beings, it would change everything, which can be awesome. But to
Yeah.
people that have control and they want the money that comes from that, they're not happy about it. You know,
Yeah.
national security.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, I wonder if they did release a certain amount, but then just quickly shifted our attention with the rest. Is kind of what I
Well,
think.
this is what they do. They put it out in front of you, but they use things like if, could, would. They'll show you something and then have people
Yeah.
laughing about it. They leave it up to you for you to decide, you
Yeah.
know? And by preconditioning, the idea is think about all the movies and TV shows that have aliens and UFOs. It's even
Yeah.
an emoji. It's even an emoji on our phone. Out of all emojis we need, right? We need a
Yeah.
UFO and an alien. Like
Totally, in my opinion.
it's everywhere. And the
Yeah.
hopes is if you show people something enough, they will learn to accept it.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
that's
totally.
what's going on. That's the definition of preconditioning. And
Mm.
that, what we're doing, getting out and sharing our stories and looking through stories, that's
Mm.
also, we are preconditioning. Just recently, the former space security of Israel came out and said there was extraterrestrial life and that there's a galactic federation, and Trump knows about it, and so does the whole administration. And he's like a
Oh
really
wow.
big guy up, and it's huge news. It was on every news channel and everything, saying talking about the Galactic Federation of Light. Like that's a real thing that people that are in
Yeah.
contact with these beings we know about. Now they're talking about it on the news because we're talking about it.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
they they only want to talk about what people want to talk about. So by us getting out there and sharing our experiences and connected
Mm.
with others, that's how we change the narrative. That's how we use the precondition and we undo that and start from a new place. And that's what the Order of Light is doing. I'm encouraging people. I've
Yeah.
been using TikTok, Order of Light 777 on TikTok. I've been on there helping a lot of people, making great content, asking people, have you seen UFOs? I have people commenting, and then I get three people, they're from the same area and they're seeing the same thing, and they get in contact just by
Yeah.
offering a place for people to talk about these things. They're making, interconnections. And I believe if my mother would have had someone to talk to, unfortunately, my mother died of liver and kidney failure at 51
Mm.
years old because she was a very heavy alcoholic. She
Mm.
believed when she had alcohol in her blood system, the abductions would stop happening.
Yeah.
Something about her blood being poisoned stopped whatever experiments they were trying to do. So, and my mother had to live with a lot of, stuff with this phenomenon that she had no one to confide in. So she
Yeah.
really drank. And I believe if my mom would have had someone to talk to and listen, that, she could possibly still be here. So that's
Yeah.
what I'm doing with the Order of Light, just trying to help people and let them know you're not alone. And no matter
Yeah.
what your
Totally.
experience is, I believe you. I'm here.
Well, trauma is real, no matter how you experience it. And someone not being
Exactly.
able to understand your trauma because it seems crazy would almost create more
Having to
trauma
keep
in
in
itself,
trauma.
knowing it's real to you. So, yeah, the Order of Light, for those of you who don't know, is a Facebook group where people can just pretty much chat about anything, but its main purpose and why it was founded was so people would have a safe space to discuss their experiences, and there's no judgment there. It's actually really good, and everyone there is super supportive. Obviously, it's moderated, so anyone that's not, whoop.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Have you found in there's a group of people, or there's a common occurrence of experience that a lot of people share?
There is one I put together, and I'm working with MUFON, and we're working on a manifesto, if you want to call
Yeah.
it. And there's a couple common factors that I've broken this down to. Number one on the list for this occurrence, whether people are involved with it and are being abducted or not, it doesn't really
Yeah.
seem to matter. In places with natural energy or man made energy,
Mm.
these things seem to be, meaning nuclear plants, military bases where they
Right.
store nuclear warheads, or great places on Earth that have crazy electromagnetic fields, which is still energy. So these
Mm.
things, their number one goal and what they're watching and using and testing and researching is energy sources. That's one of them.
Yeah.
Um, Another tie I'm making, and this one's a little on the outer edge of things, but
Yep.
native tribes. A lot of the abductees and people I'm talking to that have contact, when I start talking, I don't really like to get into it, but I ask them their nationality, and I ask them, do you have any sort of native? And I
Mm.
would say about 85% come from like native tribes of some sort. I
Wow.
think this has a lot to do, for example, like the Aboriginal people.
Mm.
The Native Americans here, the Maya, the Mexican, the ancient Mayans, the ancient Celtic people. People that have these ties to these ancient tribes.
Yep.
There's a lot of times some sort of connection between those
Yeah.
people and these things. And where these tribes live and their protected lands are normally big places of Bigfoot sightings and UFO
Yeah. Yep.
sightings. These two
Yeah.
things occur in the same areas most of the time, and it's not
Mm.
just Bigfoot, it's not just UFOs, it's a lot of strange paranormal stuff that I
Yeah.
believe feeds off energy. I think at the root of
Yeah.
it.
Totally.
Um, Now, a personal thing, one thing I've noticed, people that are getting abducted by aliens, they have a lot of the same markings. There's
Yeah.
like seven, I would say, base markings,
Mm.
but you will find them like the same marking on like the same hand, the same spot on multiple people.
Oh
It's
wow.
kind of
Yeah. That's
weird.
freaky.
There's
Yeah.
not too many. There's ones that kind of look like um, red dots, like a bunch of red
Mm.
dots. I've seen probably a big common one are these three red dots that a lot of women have on their wrist right here. I've had a lot of people send me
Right.
those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another marking is like a incision mark on their
Ooh.
shoulder or sometimes back here.
Does it
It just
present
looks,
in the form of a scar? Or is it
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
yeah?
It presents in like a form of a scar. Sometimes it will be raised,
Hmm.
like a
Yeah.
raised scar. And I've
Yeah.
seen times where they're flat. And then a really common one, they're called scoop marks. It looks like someone got a razor spoon and
Oh
just
my god, that's
shaved it out.
terrifying.
And almost 90% of the women that I've seen this, they have them on their legs.
Yeah, right. Huh.
It's really weird on their legs, these like scoop marks, and they're mostly on the calf, around the calf area. Multiple people. It's those things, and I've made one other small
Yeah.
connection. I think this is
Hmm.
huge. I believe that the alien abduction phenomena is something that is passed on through the female,
Yeah,
through
right.
the mother line. for example, say if you're a woman and you are being abducted and you have a child and daughter, they can be abducted too. But when that boy grows up and he has children, his children won't be abducted. But the
Yeah.
daughter, their children can be. I
Yeah.
believe this is something that is passed through the motherly lines.
Yeah,
From
yeah.
all my research, it's very unique, strange, getting
Yeah,
close. I
that's
guess
so
trying.
interesting. Nah, that's so interesting. Hey, so it clearly must be genetic, but it must have, I guess, limitations. Like it has to be a specific type of genetic for whatever. Like God only knows what you need that for, but yeah.
I know they need it for the hybrid program. There's a there's a lot of different species. My mother encountered a lot of them, and
Yeah.
most of them are super positive, loving human beings should be accepting these things and asking them to intervene in our lives.
Yeah.
And then there are some that are really old and they do whatever they want. But there are a few purposes. The main one my mother was involved with was the hybrid program. They would abduct her, they would extract embryo, egg, whatever. They would fertilize it, manipulate the DNA, put it back inside my mother, let it incubate a bit, bring my mother back, extract, the 9 week, 10 week old embryo,
Oh
put it in
wow.
a tube, and let it continue to grow out on the ship. Once
Yeah,
my mom got
wow.
older, she actually saw all of her children. Some
Yeah.
of them were the perfect mix of gray alien and human. Some were really deformed, like Sloth from the Goonies. Like they
Mm.
really looked like that. And
Yeah.
some looked just like you and I.
Yeah, right.
And she always begged them, I want to see my children. Can they come back with me? They would say they won't survive on Earth. No, no. And it just really broke her heart. She communicated with them telepathically. And she had quite a few of them. So I have half brothers and sisters. And that's another
Yeah.
reason I'm doing this. I lost my mother, and that's all I have left of her. And, they may not be like
I'm
us, but
past
I
that,
don't
you know.
care. I'm not looking at them as extraterrestrials. I'm looking at them as a piece of my mother, and that's all I want. So
Yeah,
I have a
definitely.
completely different agenda with disclosure, because I
Mm.
believe that they don't expose themselves because people aren't ready. A lot of people would start shooting at them out of fear because we haven't been taught to understand them. So this
Yeah.
is where people like me have to come out and explain, it's not bad. And a side note, another thing with what they're doing, that was just one sort of egg and embryo experimentation. A lot
Yeah.
of grays do this because grays are clones. They transfer their consciousness to bodies so they won't die. And it's all about your mind. You're still you, but you're just using this vehicle, and they clone.
Yeah.
Not all grays, but most of them. But what comes out of this is, after doing this so many times, they lose human emotion, and they envy us humans for having human emotion because we show love like a child showing love to his parent. They envy this. So they hope by making children that
Yeah.
have human in them, that
Yeah,
the
right.
hybrid children will show them love, but still be enough gray to go ahead and do the job that needs to be done.
Yeah,
It's
right.
it's deep stuff.
I feel like I was going off on a different tangent with that when you were just sort of talking about your mum's children, how they wouldn't survive on Earth. I was almost thinking integration. They're just working towards being able to integrate into just regular, society purely because Earth has probably got a lot of natural resources. And yeah, I'm just thinking like maybe they just see it as a gold mine for what they need.
There's a lot of species here as well that have been here. A lot of bases out in water. Antarctica is filled with them. They're all over the place. There's so many bases, and you know they the children couldn't survive here not because of a physical condition or they couldn't breathe oxygen. It was
Yeah.
just purely acceptance. You know, that's
Yeah.
all it came
Okay.
down to.
How they would
People
probably
want to
present. Yeah.
look at it, right? Human beings can't even love human beings. This is
Yeah.
what they see. This is what they watch. This is what they've
Yeah.
been trying to teach us for 12,000 years. Love one another. Then we'll think about coming and saying hi. But if you can't accept something that looks like you, but has
Yeah.
a slightly different skin color, like stupid things like racism or
Yeah.
sexual preference, all these
Mm.
dumb things that people fight and argue about.
Yeah.
There's no way that people that think like this could ever accept something that different, and
Yeah.
that's where it comes into play with connecting to people and realizing, hey man, we're all the same. We're all the same. We're all the
Yeah. Yeah.
same. And we're
Um.
connected with them.
Yeah, totally. Just to backtrack a little when bit, when you were talking about the native people tending to have a lot of experiences, places that hold spiritual significance, they were probably drawn to those places. When you go back and you look at all like cave paintings and stuff like that and cultural sort of landmarks, like there is a lot of examples of human figures that don't look human that have been jotted down and we've found them. So I think that point you made about native people being even more receptive, filled with levels that would be so interesting to explore.
Yes, a quick note off of that. I've actually recently went to petroglyph site, and I'm Native American myself. I come from the
Yeah.
Abenaki tribe, and the Abenaki tribe, the Dawn people, the New people, one of the oldest Native American people that there is.
Yeah.
And I actually went to go to a site that most people don't even know about. I recorded the places I was allowed to record, but they were like heads, the round heads, no nose, small mouths, larger eyes, and with the antennas coming off, just like the
Oh wow.
Aboriginal ones that are found in the cave with the white faces. And all
Yeah.
around the world, the same kind of petroglyph and rock carvings and cave paintings. And I went there, and because I'm an Abenaki Native American, I actually
Mm.
got to meet with one of the representatives of the tribe. And I got to see a petroglyph that was actually underwater, a lost one that I was actually the
Wow.
fourth person to see. Only five people
Holy.
have seen it. They don't want no one knowing where it's at. But I was able to go there, meditate, and check out the place and try to get in contact with my ancestors who actually, that's mind blowing. When you know it's your ancestors that put the petroglyphs there or
Yeah.
something like that, and these areas were burial mounds too. And all the petroglyphs were facing west at these two separate sites, even the site people don't know about because it's underwater.
Yeah.
They were facing the same direction, and this was a very holy spot. And the native people, they're so coy, and they just call them great spirits. They keep it simple. They don't like complicating stuff, and
Yeah.
it's really really interesting when you start to put them together because they don't look human.
Yeah, yeah.
Nope.
Right. Would you say you were drawn to that place?
Absolutely.
Like you sensed like
Uh,
there was power
yes.
there?
That's the whole reason I wanted to go there, and
Mm.
what happened was I got in contact with a professional scuba diver archaeologist, and
Yeah.
she took us up there, and she was the one that discovered the other one, and she got me in contact. So we had a tour guide, and we had a. Normally, people only can see these petroglyphs from a bridge that they built right there, and
Yeah.
but we actually went down like the side of the cliff, and I got right there. I made a video of it. It's on my YouTube channel, Order of Light, and
Yes, sweet.
TikTok. I have it on there, and I actually compare the Aboriginal faces and petroglyphs and rock carvings. I have it in the video. It's amazing, and it's definitely a connection. These sites hold a lot of energy, and in the video,
Yeah.
I don't even say really alien or UFO. I just talk about the energy that was there. It was insane. You could feel it,
Mm.
like little spider webs all up your body. It was insane.
What did that energy feel like? Did it feel like positive and empowering, or was it just like energy in the
Peace.
sense of, a light bulb's on and the light bulb's on?
Uh, peaceful.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
it was just like a turn off, like just off, peace. Okay. I was just kind of sitting there and like I had to record because I make content and stuff, but I was just sitting there for a bit, like I just gotta take
Yeah.
this in. It was just it was wild. I've never seen anything that old that people I'm related to have like really made. Not that old.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I've seen, I'm related to a few founding fathers and, I've seen their documents and stuff. And that's like 300 years ago. These are
Yeah.
petroglyphs. They're much older. And it's whoa, that's old. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
totally. It would be it'd be mind blowing. I've been to some caves in Australia, with old Aboriginal art, and it's just a whole different feeling in there when you think about the age and who was here painting these. So, and these are people I don't have a connection with. So I could
But you still feel
imagine.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So I could imagine in your situation having a connection and seeing that. It would have just been so amazing. And there's probably no words for you to actually describe
Yeah,
that
it's
experience.
hard. It was my great grandfather. He was actually he made two magical canoes by hand. They're some of the
Holy.
last hand done style Native American canoes that were built. They're both
Yeah.
in museums. One was sold to Avery Rockefeller, like the Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Uh, my great grandfather and Rockefeller, they were actually friends, and they would take this magical canoe and go on these paddle rides on one lake only. And
Yeah,
after my
right.
grandfather died, my great grandfather passed away. They those canoes never touched water again, and they went into museums. And
Yeah, right.
it's interesting and just a lot of different things. I going back even further than that, I had family members that were the chief of the tribe. Had a couple shamans in the family, medicine people. My grandmother had a lot of abilities. My red hair actually comes from my Native American grandmother.
Oh, wow.
It's yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a lot of things, and I believe native people, I believe their genetics haven't been manipulated as much, and it might make things easier for contact sometimes. You know, that's just a
Well,
hypothesis because
I
I
was
know,
even thinking you're just more open and it's just a different way of thinking, I guess.
yeah, that's another thing too, I
You're
guess.
more in tune with being open, and those sites that you
Telephone
can
towers
visit are
probably.
almost like,
Exactly. I was told by the representative the world's one big tin can. You just got to listen, And
yeah.
I said, man, that's good. you
That's going
know
to be the
that
title of this episode, by the way.
the world's
That's
one
gold.
big tin
Yeah,
can. You
you
just
just
got to
gotta
listen.
listen. I love that.
But exactly, it's all
Yeah,
connected,
that's
and
beautiful.
that's a good way of putting it. It really does. Being, different cultures and different, especially native people, they're really in tune with everything. They understand why things are connected. And when you start doing that, you know, the ones above us know that. They say, hey, these people are pretty cool. They get it. They understand there's one source energy within the universe and everything's connected. I'll go hang out with them.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the natives, I'll draw you. Just sit right there. Why I spend 2 days carving you in stone.
Yeah,
You,
yeah,
you know,
totally. Yeah.
it's crazy how long like and caves and darkness and using lights or whatever. Like it's you've seen them.
Yeah.
It's mind boggling.
And in truth, um, it's probably just science. Like, you know how they say magic is indistinguishable from science if you don't
Yeah.
know? And
Uh
I
huh.
feel like we just don't know so much that when stuff like that happens, we're just like, nah, it's got to be crazy. Don't believe
Yeah.
it. instantly just shut off to it, where native people would just be like, no, that's how it is, and
Uh-huh.
have, I guess, the mechanisms to deal with it because they just know it's part of the culture, I guess.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
it,
totally.
it works. It works. And there's a lot of people, if you don't know your native thing, anyone listening,
Mm.
it really, at the end of the day, it don't matter. If you're an
Yeah.
open-minded person, and this UFO crash, it really changed, but I kept my mouth shut because I learned at a young age watching my mom at a party, right? Someone
Mm.
would talk about an alien movie or something, and my mom would go, I got a story for you. And she would tell them everything, same as
Yeah.
I've told you, but maybe even less. And people would start laughing, her friends laughing at her. And
Yeah.
I remember seeing her crying and walking off. And I learned at like 5 or 6, if I want to be successful, I need to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
That's what I did, and I went
Mm.
on to do really good things because I kept my mouth shut. I did share it with some people, really close
Mm.
people,
Yeah.
which now that I found the evidence, it's really cool because now they're
Yeah.
seeing that, guess what? I wasn't
Well,
making it up.
yeah, I've read the
But
articles. Even the articles speculate that it couldn't have been helicopter.
and you've read them, and I'm
Yeah.
glad you did. See, a lot of people don't, and it's sad because when you actually read them, you see how MUFON is trying to protect my family. They did
Mm.
things, for example, when they said she was out at a party the night before with her husband. My mom wasn't married. I didn't know my dad. You know, they did
Really?
that
Oh my
so my
god.
mom didn't look like a hussy. They didn't
Yeah.
want people. It was a Christian country town. They didn't want people
Mm.
saying, "Why is that girl out with a guy? She has a baby, 22 years old." They were
Yeah.
trying to protect my mother, her reputation. They
Yeah.
really went out of their way. But when you read carefully, even the police officer says, there's no doubt in my mind that these
Yeah.
women saw this. We know them. And
Yeah, totally.
the firefighters, even the military people, there was one where when the military was called, they had a little weird encounter. And there's a lot of impressive details down to the cloud coverage, all the places called. MUFON did a good job, but they
Yeah.
had to protect my mom. So
Yeah.
they had to pitch it as a helicopter, but made it a point that no helicopter was found.
Yeah, yeah. That yeah, I do like that because they were just like it could have been a helicopter, but
Yeah.
this is what they saw. Um, so yeah, it really left it open to actually the truth, which I found
Yeah.
was really weird. Like I felt like I was just reading about a UFO crash, and the helicopter was this off in the side thing that I didn't even consider. That like it just the article almost just like could have been a helicopter and that's enough about that. So
And they did it on purpose. And the
yeah.
craziest thing in my research looking for this just recently, 5 years prior to my case, I found another situation, three same people involved, my cousin who was the fire chief, the Dover Air Force Base, and the Coast Guard 5 years before caught something on their radar, a blue light that people reported crashing or something like that. And
Oh
I found
wow.
this article 5 years before they were already in contact. That's how it was cleaned up so fast. They already had something in plan due to the
Yeah,
articles
yeah.
I found 5 years before. Those same key players. And I've reached out, and here in the state of New Jersey, there's a lot of really big cases. And I'm working with the people. I'm good friends with George Filer, retired Air Force intelligence major. Back in
Yeah.
1978, he was involved with the extraterrestrial being shot on a base here in New Jersey. I'm friends with him. This happened.
Oh wow.
He also personally chased UFOs for the Air Force over England. He chased these things. He's the guy that debriefed most of the military on extraterrestrials. And he's
Oh
still alive. He's really
wow.
old, but he shared my story because he believes my story and that story. And
Mm.
there's one other story of a nuclear warhead site in North Jersey. And
Mm.
these three things all have one thing in common: nuclear. And it's no
Yeah, right.
coincidence. It's no
Yeah.
coincidence. And instead of, unfortunately, with a lot of UFO investigators, every case that comes in, it stands alone.
Mm.
People just look at one UFO case. What we are doing and what I'm helping MUFON to do, and we're all out here trying to do this, we're connecting them all together because
Yeah.
it's more of a story when you
Mm.
combined it all. You know, you
Yeah,
take five
totally.
good stories, you have a great story, right?
Yeah, definitely. And too, if you can draw links and
And I
comparisons
guess too,
between them,
because
everyone's experiences are so different. Even from the shape of the craft, people are just like, oh yeah, that can't be a thing. The crafts were different, it doesn't exist. Yet we all have different cars. It's,
Exactly.
yeah, totally. So you can probably draw so many links and comparisons if you just stop looking at the obvious things the stories. And that's what I think I like so much about your research. You've gone, okay, let's look at the areas. Let's look at everything surrounding the event as opposed to just the single minded, narrow sort of perspective of this is the event. It's everything else. And that's what I really enjoy about your form of storytelling. And it's almost like crime scene investigation, like
Well,
forensics.
that's what it is, and I'm in the process of trying to work with. I'm trying to find a really good metal detecting team because it's
Yeah.
a really swampy, marshy area. And of
Mm,
course, there's no doubt in my mind. I know 110% that that thing crashed, and how fast they cleaned it up. There's no
yeah.
way they got every little piece. And you want to hear something even more interesting? There
Yeah.
was no fire marks. There was markings everywhere. There were no burn marks anywhere.
Wow.
What could possibly blow up and explode and not leave fire marks?
Yeah.
Something not
Yeah,
from
that's
here.
insane. That's totally
Enough from
insane.
here.
Yeah.
And I
Wow.
truly believe that white light, that flash, a little, exclusive. I normally don't share this because my main goal is for people just to accept that something crashed behind my house. That's
Yeah.
been goal number one.
Yeah.
Then to have them accept that it was a UFO, goal number two.
Yeah.
Goal number three that I'm being patient with is I truly believe that it was some sort of light ball UFO that took this craft out. I've
Yeah.
had so many people. It don't make sense. They have all this technology, right? And they just go behind your house and just crash. And
Yeah.
no, I believe something interfered because the ones that were in the ship were a species known as the tall whites. They're taller grays with light grayish skin. That's why they're called tall whites. And they're the nasty ones. And they did nasty things with my mom. And I believe some of the good ones she was in contact with actually took that thing out to protect me and my mother. And
Yeah, right.
I've later on down the road, I won't get into it, but I had an encounter 21 years to the day of April 21st when the UFO crash happened, which
Yeah.
just this June, I had no idea when the incident happened. My family didn't know. We didn't know the exact date. In
Mm.
2012, April 21st, I actually had an
Boy.
encounter with a ball of light in my living room.
Holy shit.
21 years to the anniversary date, and I just made that connection this past year. Over
Yeah,
my head. I
right.
didn't know the date, and I didn't even look at it that way. It's taken me 30 years to actually understand what happened to me.
Yeah.
It's insane. A lot of layers, for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely. You know I'm going to ask about that ball of light, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
So
It
yeah,
was,
where were you? What were you doing?
so I'll keep it simple.
Yep.
Uh, it was nighttime, around 7 o'clock at night, April 21st. You may ask, how do you know when you saw that ball of light?
Mm.
That will come later. But basically, I was in my living room and I was playing with my cat. And at the time, my other was in the back room. We had an apartment, and you would go down the hallway, We had a bedroom with a big walk-in closet, and she was actually in the walk-in closet, and I was out in the living room playing with my cat. As I'm playing with my cat 3 feet in front of me, this like living ball of light appears, maybe the size of, both your hands making a ball, three
Yeah.
feet in front of me for about 4 Mississippi. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi.
Wow.
Then, then at that time, it sucked itself kind of into itself,
Yeah,
and
right.
then it flashed. But the flash, it wasn't circular flash. It was
Yeah.
very sharp and flat like a piece of paper. And when this happened, I had excruciating pain in my forehead. And that came along with a lot of other things, including a random math problem and prototypes and things you can't imagine. I've never
Yeah.
shown them. I never will show them to anyone. But I wrote them down. And on the back side of one of the papers, there was like something that wasn't really valuable, in my opinion. But I took a picture and put it back on Facebook back then. And I said,
Yeah.
math rules. And it was like a matrix code, and
Yeah, right.
math rules. And just this past year, I was looking and I saw the date and it said April 21st was when I posted that, which was the night I
Yeah.
had the experience. So I was blown away. And after I saw this flash, and to describe it more, I just had this feeling it was alive. It was definitely intelligent. I had this gut feeling like it wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't afraid whatsoever. I was just kind of in awe, like, what? You know?
Mm.
And inside of it, the best way I could explain it is like electrical water moving around.
Hmm.
Um, or spaghetti water. If
Yeah, right.
like I can't describe it. And this light isn't a light source we have.
Yeah,
Not
totally.
lightning don't even look like it. Whatever it is, it's a light I've never seen before. And after that happened, I actually had a lot of memories going back to the crash. And
Yeah.
at that point in time, I called my mother because I was going through a lot, and I was hearing a lot of things that I didn't really think about before. And that
Yeah.
was when my mother really filled me in on what was going on. And I
Okay.
was 24 or 25 years old. And
Yeah, right.
that's when my mother told me things that I left out of the documentary. And, um, and I just started having memories from my lifetime, from other. It was just wild. Whatever this thing was, they're in
Yeah, right.
control of extraterrestrials. These things, these things are not like physical. Like a lot of
Yeah.
extraterrestrials, like if you shot one, they would die.
Yeah.
They're like us, Even the clones, they still have a shell.
Mm.
Whatever these beings are, these light beings, they run the whole show. They
Yeah.
they they are whatever they are. But I believe they were protecting me, and now looking back, I understand why that thing came back. Probably just a checkup, or maybe I was too stupid and not evolving fast enough, and it thought it needed to help me along, to help me
Yeah.
remember things because I suppressed a lot, and I just wanted to be cool and have friends. So
Yeah.
I just didn't really talk about it. I was a pastor. So believe me,
Oh, wow.
I went to Bible college. I went to Bible
Wow.
college. I was a youth pastor. I was not talking about UFOs and aliens. Then I lived in the Middle East for 2 years.
Yeah.
Shortly after all that, and I learned ancient Islam and the mysteries of Mesopotamia and Anunnaki history. I was living in the oldest place in the world, learning. I was a sore thumb. You could see me. ISIS could see me from miles away. Uh, but it was awesome. A great experience. I loved it there, and I learned so much, so
Yeah,
much.
right.
And I've been all over the place. I've always kept an open mind, and
Mm.
wherever I am, I become whatever.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
always try to meet on a level.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's cool. Um, so when the ball of light gave you that sort of like little packet of information, could you understand it? Because I know you wrote it down, or were you just
No.
like, I get what you're trying to do, but
I wrote it all down. When you actually look at the papers, which I've saved, they've traveled with me all around the world. I keep them
yep,
close to me. I made copies for me just in case, but I made sure it wasn't hooked up to the internet. I've never taken a picture of them. But
yep,
when it was coming and you look at these, it looks frantic. Like I couldn't
yeah,
get it
right,
out fast enough. A lot of it, in my personal opinion, is nonsense. But the main point, the big thing that's on there is pretty clear, which it's a mathematical equation. And in my thought process, why it was kind of coming to me, I just saw something I didn't understand. But I know because I saw it, there has to mathematically science. Like you said, magic and science. I
yeah,
know there's
totally,
science behind this light being. It's
yeah,
consisting of atoms of light. So atoms of light must exist in order for this being that I just saw. So
yeah,
this math problem is basically how to harness what they can't figure out in Geneva at the particle accelerator. It's an equation on how to harness this atom of light. And I won't say what the equation's called, but it's an actual equation on how to harness this so we can fuel cities for long, long time. There's just one catch. It can also be really, really bad if it got into the wrong hands. So I'm
yeah.
perfectly okay going with the grave with it. It's not important. The world's
Yeah.
still going to
That
go
was my
on.
next question. I was like, have you tried to get in contact with anyone that could use that information?
Um, so, like when I was overseas, what I did, I took certain parts of the math problem and I let Turkish math professors. I was a teacher myself, had a lot of other professors. I was actually teaching English, and I had them look at certain parts, and it all made sense except there was one part where it's just over their head. It was like outside of Einstein's theory. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It basically his theories. It kind of, but it goes around that. But it's all about this atom of light and how to
Yeah.
harness it and how to use it. And along with that came a prototype of some sort of craft that is slightly larger than the Great Pyramid. It's like some sort of air,
Right.
massive, using 2 Tesla coils in the center, and then the actual energy source of this starship or whatever you want to call it is this atom of light that is actually stored in a cube. You got to use a cube in order to harness this for some reason. I don't know why. Like you asked me, did I understand this when it came to me?
Yeah,
No.
yep.
I'm still trying to understand it. I just this past year I
Yeah.
finally made sense of it. I do have connections when I'm ready. My dad actually works for SpaceX, NASA,
Yeah,
the Air
sweet.
Force Base, and he said when I'm ready he could try to pass it down the line. But I'm too worried that if it's not me personally going directly to say Elon Musk and saying, "Hey, here you go." I don't trust all the other hands it would go through, and then people. I don't care what's done with it. I just want the credit.
Mm.
You know, I don't want to be like Tesla. Tesla is my biggest hero. I don't want to be. I don't want to create the future and then be tossed aside because I was trying to benefit humanity. I want my name to be there like, hey, this math problem is meant to help people, not to make explosives and wipe out continents.
Yeah, that's easy.
Um,
Like obviously too, if the control of what you're sharing gets taken out of your hands, and
yeah,
it's like here protected in a military base where you have no access to say no, I want that back. You
yeah,
can't you
it's too
can't say
late.
that. It's yeah, totally too late. So
When
I
I was
understand your
young,
reluctance there.
yeah, when I was young, I was reading once again the whole nuclear factor. I was reading about the atomic bomb and the guys that helped with some of the math problems, just the math problems. regretted it. It haunted them.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
I learned from it. And trust me, I would love to put it out there because not too many people can create a math problem that people can't solve. Normally,
Yeah.
when someone does that, it's kind of a big deal. But
Yeah.
I would love to get the credit of like, because I'm a silly
Yeah.
guy. I tell a lot of jokes. I act goofy, but it would
Yeah.
be nice to know that like deep down inside, my brain works sometimes. But the truth
Yeah.
is, it wasn't even really me. It was given to me. You know.
Yeah.
So I'm not really in it for like getting my name out there because technically, if I'm honest with people,
Mm.
it wasn't me. And
Yeah.
Tesla even told people when he was asked, "Where do you get this information?" I had visions given to me by extraterrestrials. He thought he was
Yeah.
from Venus. It's mind blowing, and and no one believed
Yeah.
him. He was laughed out, and all of his inventions and ideas were stolen or not used. Money.
Yeah.
It's sad when we could be living in a whole nother world right now. We are in Tesla's world, but his version of it, it would have been so much easier and cheaper. That was the wrong word Tesla used. He said cheap all the time,
So,
and
I'll
Edison
ask
and the
one last
boys did not
question
like
and then
that.
we'll wrap it up.
Oh
But
man,
I'll
yeah,
probably hit
totally.
you up for another interview much later because there's still so many questions
Yeah,
I have for you. And I just don't
it's a
think
lot of
there's ever going to
layers.
be enough time ever to ask them all. So, my last question was just purely based on when you shared those mathematical equations with those people to see if they could solve them or understand them. What was their reaction? Did they understand what you were giving them, or?
They didn't think too much of it. Certain parts of it, they kind of figured it out right away. They
Yeah.
had a when you're dealing with this kind of mathematics, it's actually pretty universal. Mathematics are simple.
Yeah.
Like three representing a triangle, one representing a circle,
Yeah.
to a right angle, things like that. Just these universal codes and things like that. And it was
Yeah.
pretty simple equation. And the way I gave it to them, they would understand all the parts. There was just one part of it that would
Mm.
throw them through a loop. Everything else, it equaled out. It made sense. They're like, well, yeah, that's that and that's that. And
Yeah.
they're like, that's cool. It wasn't mind blowing or anything by itself.
Yeah.
That's why I gave it to them in parts. But the last part of it just throws for a loop.
Yeah. Would
And
you
I even
say?
have a hard time understanding it.
Yeah. Would you say the last part it's very alien in its composition, and hence we probably don't even have the tools to understand it? Or is it more that it just probably doesn't make sense in terms of we just don't understand it at all?
It goes out of our laws of mathematics,
Yeah.
which is based off of our physics. Like,
Mm.
and I have this wacky idea. In order to go the speed of light, it would help to use light energy. Just a
Yeah.
wacky idea of mine.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, there's been scientists before us that have made great discoveries with light, like the speed of light. That's an
Mm.
awesome discovery. Which things like that, that makes sense. But when it comes to harnessing an energy source that no one's ever seen before, like the ball of light that I saw, you know, um, I still don't know how to describe it. And this is kind of a stretch, but I believe somewhere throughout history that these balls of light have actually been trapped and used to do certain things for humanity and perform really wild things that we know through history.
Yeah,
Just
right.
an idea, a little hint, hint, hint. It was inside of the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, right.
uh, they're really powerful and they have capabilities to do some wild things. And I mean, I don't consider myself a smart person, but
Mm.
what this thing gave to me, it was beyond my understanding, but it's still so much more. Like, I definitely didn't deserve it. And, it came with a lot of unpleasant things too. A
Yeah,
spiritual
right.
awakening isn't all of fun. It's normally a lot of suffering, honestly,
Yeah.
because that's how you learn compassion for others, is by suffering yourself. And
Yeah.
there's a correlation in there, and everyone goes through something, and that's why it's so important to talk about. And this ball of light, after I saw it, it was like, even after the UFO crash and all that, I still had doubts. Even
Yeah,
though my
which is
mother
fair
was being
enough
abducted,
because, yeah, your logical mind is just like, nah, don't be silly. Like,
even in the church as a pastor, I
mm,
still had minor doubts. But when
mm,
I saw, I mean, I always believed, but when
mm,
I saw that ball of light, it was the first time in my life where I'm like, something actually happens after you die. Even though I always believed it, I was out there preaching it. Like, after I
yeah,
saw this, I'm like, there's energy we don't understand. There's actually things that we have no comprehension of. It was like that
mm,
realization of, and I've seen UFOs, and that still didn't do it because it's all the way up there. And
yeah,
it
yeah,
it didn't interact with me personally. It
yeah,
didn't affect me mentally, my DNA, whatever. But
yeah.
when you see something like that, it's enough to make you go insane, go
Yeah,
off the
totally.
walls. And you read through history of some people that saw these same kind of things, and they did a lot of crazy stuff. So I think me
Mm,
just keeping my mouth shut, and unfortunately at the time when I saw this shortly after, I was a professional musician. I lost my band. My church kicked me out, called me a demon, and my wife divorced me and stranded me in Florida. I had nothing, and
yeah,
that's when I ended up in the Middle East. And it was
yeah,
all because
right.
I saw this ball of light. So sometimes these experiences really come with a lot of bad things attached
Yeah,
to them.
totally.
But
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it for anything.
So, in
Yeah, for
summary,
sure.
what advice would you give to someone that's had an experience and they're not sure what to do about it or who they should see or if they should even share it?
It's a great question, and it comes down to the person. I encourage everyone to, no matter what, get out there and share your story. Whether people
Mm.
believe you or not, that's besides the point. But at the same time, I understand how painful it can be to be rejected. So I would suggest trying to find people that you love and trust and that you think have an open mind to the point of where they could possibly believe you. And when you
Mm.
explain your story, try to explain it as simple as possible. Sometimes when we overload people, because this phenomena has many layers to it, everyone's personal experience could be a book. There's
Mm.
these aren't things that just happen once, and there's a lot of things that are tied to them. And when that happens, it's hard to really explain the story. And anyone out there, if you reached out to the Order of Lay on TikTok, Facebook, just we're trying to get everywhere. We even got an Instagram. And if you just reach out and look for people that these things and sharing their experience, you'll find others that have your experience. So just look for them and try to find others that have had your experience. And the Order of Light, if you want to come to a place where people talk about UFOs, I have one video where I go over like 10 different types of
Mhm.
UFOs, naming each one. And I say, have you seen a UFO? If so, please comment. And I set up a
Yeah.
poll. I set up a poll, and the numbers of yes are out the roofs, and the no's were pretty
Yeah.
small. But a lot of people are saying what they saw, and they're like, "Oh, me too. I live here." So, and not just
Yeah.
aliens, everything, all paranormal. It's important to share your story, And even though it may get rejected 99 times, on the 100th time, it's completely worth it when someone validates your story. You just can't give up.
Yeah, so everybody can find the Order of Light on Facebook. Um, as Robert just said, TikTok. Is it just called the Order of Light on TikTok also?
On
Or
TikTok, it's Order of Light 777. But if you type Order of Light, it will come up pretty much
yeah.
on anywheres if you type on Google, and it's getting up there.
Yeah, cool. Is there any other places or services that you want to talk about?
Uh, on all of my social accounts, I have a link tree, which is a link where it will have all my social accounts and
Yeah,
all of
cool.
that. So
Yeah.
I'll probably give that to you. So if you want to attach this to when you
Yeah,
upload it,
perfect.
that
Yeah.
way it's one link. You click the link, you will see my UFO crash documentary, 3 videos on YouTube. You'll see my personal Facebook, the Order of Light group. You will find the YouTube, the TikTok, the Instagram, everything in one simple place. And I'm working on a merch store. Whoa!
Ooh, perfect. Thanks for coming on the podcast and chatting with us. And hopefully, this won't be a one time thing because you have so many stories. And I feel like we just touched the tip of the iceberg today.
Absolutely. There's much more to it.
That's it for today, everybody. Thanks for the chat.
Thank you. I had a blast.
The world's one big tin can. You just gotta listen.